Last month, U.S. President Trump caused an uproar on social media, declaring the Panama Canal an important national asset of the United States and threatening to take back control of the canal through military means. In order to ensure control of the canal, the United States took capital means and acquired 90% of the shares of ports controlled by Chinese companies at both ends of the Panama Canal for $22.8 billion, bringing this important economic lifeline back into the U.S. capital system. It is worth noting that from the beginning of the United States' claim to control the Panama Canal to the final acquisition of ports controlled by Chinese companies, it seems that China has reacted coldly and has not shown too much concern. Later, some authoritative experts pointed out that China does not need to worry too much about the United States controlling the Panama Canal because China is working with Russia to plan a super project, the Arctic route of the Ice Silk Road. It is understood that this waterway has begun to operate gradually, and the transportation volume this year has increased 35 times. So why does the United States attach so much importance to controlling the Panama Canal? And how will the Arctic route between China and Russia subvert the world pattern? If you like our video content, please click to subscribe to my YouTube channel so that you can receive all our latest video content. Now, let's get into today's topic. Everyone should know the Panama Canal, an artificial waterway connecting the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, which has played a vital role in global shipping since its opening. As far as I know, the Panama Canal is the throat of global shipping. It is 81 kilometers long and handles about 5% of the world's trade goods each year. Every year, about 13,000 to 14,000 ships pass through the canal, connecting 1,920 ports in about 170 countries and regions. For Panama, the canal is almost the lifeblood of its economy, with revenue reaching $4.986 billion in fiscal year 2024, accounting for 6% of the country's GDP. If you add in logistics, ports, and other industries related to the canal, the overall contribution rate is even as high as 30%. However, what you may not know is that although the Panama Canal is now owned by Panama, it has always been a territory of the United States. In 1903, the United States gained permanent control of the canal in exchange for supporting Panama's independence and established a country within a country in the Canal Zone. According to statistics, during the period of U.S. control, the Panama Canal generated more than $1.9 billion in revenue for the United States. It was not until December 1999 that the United States completely handed over the canal to Panama in accordance with the Panama Canal Treaty signed in 1977. However, even so, the United States still maintains its influence on the canal in many ways. As the Panama Canal has been expanding in economic development, its dependence on U.S. goods exports has reached 74%. With trade worth $270 billion a year relying on this waterway, the United States' obsession with controlling the canal has not subsided. According to data, in 2024, the total cargo volume of the canal exceeded 230 million tons, of which more than two-thirds of the cargo was directly related to the United States. At the same time, with the rise of China's economy, the United States' desire to control this waterway has become stronger, especially considering the current tensions between the United States and China, and the United States hopes to influence China's trade development by controlling shipping. However, although the United States has been trying to regain control of the Panama Canal for many years, it has never been able to do so. Until recently, after Trump took office, he did express his readiness to forcibly regain control of the canal through military means and through capital means. He purchased shares in several important Chinese ports around the world. So what exactly happened? As far as I know, in March 2025, the United States acquired 90% of the shares of the ports at both ends of the Panama Canal through the BlackRock Consortium for $22.8 billion, and reincorporated the economic lifeline of the canal into the U.S. capital system. The two ports, Balboa Port and Cristobal Port, were once operated by companies under Chinese entrepreneur Li Ka-shing. The Chinese company sold the two ports to the American BlackRock Group for $22.8 billion US. And this move was seen as a key step for the United States to strengthen its control over the throat lock of the Panama Canal. In the future, the United States may take discriminatory measures against Chinese ships by controlling these ports, such as raising tolls, delaying navigation, and even imposing an embargo on the grounds of national security. Then, the U.S. media reported that the Pentagon had received an order from the White House to immediately provide a reliable military option to ensure that the United States can use the Panama Canal without restrictions. However, Trump's argument that the United States paid a huge price to build the canal was strongly refuted by Panamanian President Moreno, who said that Panama would never compromise with the United States. So, can the United States really achieve its goals successfully? In fact, there are reasons why the Panamanian president dared to refute the United States. In today's era, it is obviously irrational to use military threats to force Panama to hand over control of the canal. From an economic perspective, the daily toll of the Panama Canal is as high as $18 million US, and it is supported by a huge trade network covering 1,920 ports in 170 countries. If a military blockade occurs, about 30% of the goods will have to detour through the Suez Canal or around the Cape of Good Hope, which will increase the transportation cost of a single box by 9% to 22%. This will undoubtedly bring a huge impact on global trade. More seriously, the transfer of control of the canal may trigger a domino effect. Considering that the Suez Canal has been affected by the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, if the Panama Canal is blocked again, the global shipping network will be paralyzed. The International Shipping Association has issued a warning that this situation may cause a loss of 0.5% to 1% of global GDP, equivalent to hundreds of billions of US dollars in economic losses. If the United States really takes the canal by force, the consequences of this action will go far beyond Latin America and may cause a huge shock to the global supply chain. As the Golden Waterway connecting the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, the Panama Canal carries 5% of the world's trade volume, with about 14,000 ships passing through it each year. If a military occupation occurs, it may lead to the interruption of the canal's operations, forcing ships to detour around Cape Horn in South America, which will increase the voyage by 11,000 kilometers, and transportation costs will soar by 15% to 20%. American consumers may face rising commodity prices, while Latin American countries' agricultural and mineral exports will also suffer. Therefore, once the United States attempts to dominate the Panama Canal by military means, it will not only face Panama, but the entire global shipping economy. In addition, the United States hopes to restrict the shipping plan of Chinese ships by controlling ports, but has recently encountered new challenges. The main reason is that in 2025, China and Russia jointly promoted a new route, the Arctic route. After my investigation, the Arctic route is not a simple route, but consists of three main parts: the Northeast Passage, the Central Passage, and the Northwest Passage. The Northeast Passage runs along Russia's northern coastline, connecting Asia and Europe. The Central Passage crosses the North Pole directly, which is theoretically the shortest route, but the ice in this area is the most severe. The Northwest Passage passes through the archipelago in northern Canada and Greenland, connecting the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans. The first section of the Arctic route departs from the Berlast Logistics Center in Moscow Oblast, and the goods are transported by rail to the port of Arkhangelsk. The entire journey is about 1,200 kilometers. The second section departs from the port of Arkhangelsk along the Northeast Passage, which is the main part of the Arctic route, and travels by sea to Cape Dezhnev in the Bering Strait. This section is about 5,600 kilometers. The third section starts from the Bering Strait, along the route along the west coast of the North Pacific, and finally arrives at the coastal ports of China. The journey is about 6,600 kilometers. This route is considered to be the best channel for China to connect with Western countries. The total mileage of the entire Arctic route is about 13,200 kilometers, and the entire transportation process takes about 20 to 25 days. In comparison, the traditional route required a detour of 36 days, but now it only takes about 20 days, greatly optimizing China's future shipping efficiency. At the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum in June 2024, a Chinese emerging shipping company signed a cooperation agreement with a Russian state, Atomic Energy Corporation, to form a fleet capable of sailing in the Arctic route all year round. In addition, the two sides will build the first batch of 5 ARC-7 class polar container ships, and the first ship is expected to be put into operation in 2027. By then, China and Russia will achieve the goal of sailing in the Northeast Passage from summer and autumn to year-round navigation. According to Russian data, the cargo volume along the Northeast Passage of the Arctic route has increased from 4 million tons in 2014 to 46 million tons in 2024. This growth is enough to prove that the importance of the Arctic route as a trade channel is increasing year by year. Russia hopes that through cooperation with China, the cargo transportation volume of the Arctic route can reach 270 million tons by 2030. In contrast, the Panama Canal faces many limitations. The first is the high tolls. The cost of a large container ship passing through the Panama Canal is as high as more than $200,000. Secondly, there is the size limit. The canal's locks are only 33.5 meters wide and no more than 294 meters long, which means that many modern large ships cannot pass through it all. On the other hand, although the Arctic route is controlled in part by Canada and in part by Russia, it is obviously hopeless for the United States to control this route. What's more, the relationship between the United States and Canada is becoming increasingly tense, and China is the largest buyer of Russian energy and trade. Although the Arctic route used to be difficult for trade ships to pass due to the heavy ice, in fact, China and Russia have long been prepared for this. Both sides have led trade ships to move forward smoothly by vigorously developing icebreakers. In fact, the canals that the United States wants to control are not limited to the Panama Canal. The Suez Canal, connecting the Red Sea and the Mediterranean, is one of the most convenient waterways between Asia and Europe. The Red Sea is one of the most important trade corridors and energy transportation channels in the world. About 12% of cargo transportation and nearly 1/3 of container trade need to pass through here every year. Today, trade accounts for 1/3 to 1/4 of the global economy, and nearly 90% of global trade transportation relies on sea transportation. Therefore, facing such a huge cake, Trump will naturally not let it go easily. In March this year, the U.S. Federal Maritime Commission officially launched a special review of the world's 7 major straits and waterways, which carry more than 90% of the world's bulk commodity transportation. From this point, it is not difficult to see that the United States is trying to dominate the world economy by controlling global shipping. So, do you think the United States can succeed? To not miss out on our future projects and news updates, please make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. We will continue to provide you with more exciting and interesting content.